What if I told you that one man, an unassuming, baby-faced financier from Malaysia, managed to pull off one of the largest financial frauds in history? That billions of dollars, meant to build hospitals, schools, and infrastructure for an entire nation, were instead siphoned away to bankroll a lifestyle of unimaginable luxury. A fraud so vast that it entangled Wall Street bankers, Hollywood celebrities, Middle Eastern royalty, and even heads of state. This is the story of Jho Low and the 1MDB scandal, a global web of corruption, deception, and excess that shook governments and financial systems around the world. This isn't just about stolen money. It's about how greed and glamour blinded some of the most powerful people on earth. And how an ambitious young man convinced an entire country, and Hollywood itself, that he was a billionaire genius, when in reality, he was orchestrating one of the greatest heists the world has ever seen. Low Taik Jho, better known as Jho Low, was born in Penang, Malaysia, in 1981. He wasn't from an impoverished background. His family was comfortable with modest wealth from real estate investments. But he was far from the billionaire elite he would later pretend to be. What set Jho apart was his obsession with proximity to power and money. Educated at Harrow, one of Britain's most prestigious boarding schools, and later at Wharton in the United States, Jho mastered the art of social climbing. At Wharton, he was never the brightest student, but he was the most connected. He cultivated relationships with wealthy Middle Eastern students, sons of oil magnates, and members of royal families. Jho understood something fundamental. In the world of high finance, perception often becomes reality. If people believe you are rich and powerful, they treat you as though you are. He began presenting himself as a well-connected dealmaker, whispering of sovereign wealth funds, family ties to Middle Eastern royalty, and exclusive investment opportunities. When Jho Low returned to Malaysia, he was not yet rich, but he was already rehearsing the role he would play for the rest of his life. The mysterious billionaire who always seemed to know someone more powerful than you. In 2009, Malaysia's then Prime Minister Najib Razak launched a sovereign wealth fund called 1 Malaysia Development Berhad, 1MDB. Its purpose was noble: to attract foreign investment, fund infrastructure projects, and propel Malaysia into economic modernization. But from the very beginning, Jho Low positioned himself as an advisor behind the scenes. Though he had no official role, his fingerprints were everywhere. He convinced Najib and his allies that he had the connections to bring in money from the Middle East, particularly from Saudi Arabia and Abu Dhabi. Billions of dollars began flowing into 1MDB through bond offerings arranged by Goldman Sachs, one of the most powerful banks in the world. Between 2009 and 2013, Goldman helped 1MDB raise more than $6.5 billion. In return, the bank took staggering fees, over $600 million, far above industry norms. But here was the catch. Much of this money never made it to development projects. Instead, billions were siphoned off through a labyrinth of offshore shell companies, fake joint ventures, and complex financial transactions designed to confuse regulators. At the heart of this scheme was Jho Low. So where did the money go? Into the most extravagant lifestyle the world had ever seen. Jho Low reinvented himself as an international Playboy billionaire. He purchased luxury real estate in New York, Los Angeles, and London. He acquired a $250 million super yacht called Equanimity. He bought works of art by Monet, Picasso, and Basquiat, paying record-breaking prices at auctions. But perhaps most famously, Jho Low used stolen money to buy his way into Hollywood. He struck up friendships with Leonardo DiCaprio, Jamie Foxx, Paris Hilton, and countless celebrities who were dazzled by his generosity. He threw parties that became legendary: champagne fountains, private concerts by Britney Spears and Alicia Keys, and million-dollar gambling nights in Las Vegas. In 2013, Jho Low helped finance The Wolf of Wall Street, Martin Scorsese's film about greed and excess, an irony so brazen it borders on satire. DiCaprio thanked his friend Jho in his Golden Globes acceptance speech, never realizing, or perhaps never asking, where the money had come from. For Jho Low, these parties and investments weren't just indulgences, they were part of the illusion. The more he flaunted wealth, the more legitimate he seemed. And the more legitimate he seemed, the easier it became to steal even more. By 2015, whispers began to spread. something about 1MDB didn't add up. Malaysia's opposition politicians started questioning why billions of dollars had vanished from the fund's accounts. International journalists and watchdogs noticed money flowing through offshore havens linked to Jho Low. The Wall Street Journal published explosive reports tying Najib Razak himself to suspicious transactions. Investigators discovered that nearly $700 million had landed directly into Najib's personal bank account. Najib claimed it was a donation from Saudi royalty, but the truth was far murkier. Meanwhile, regulators in Singapore, Switzerland, and the United States started following the money trail. The scheme was so vast, it touched dozens of countries. Luxury condos in New York, paintings in London, shell companies in the British Virgin Islands. Every purchase left breadcrumbs. The United States Department of Justice eventually called it the largest case of kleptocracy it had ever investigated. They alleged that more than $4.5 billion had been stolen from 1MDB, with Jho Low as the mastermind. When the scandal broke wide open, Jho Low vanished. He slipped out of Malaysia, moving between China, Macau, and other safe havens, shielded by political connections and private security. The US seized many of his assets: his Beverly Hills mansion, his private jet, his prized artworks, even the equanimity, which was eventually sold off for hundreds of millions. Leonardo DiCaprio quietly returned gifts he had received, including a Picasso and a Basquiat. Miranda Kerr, the Australian supermodel, returned millions in jewelry Jho had given her. But Jho Low himself remained elusive. While Najib Razak faced trial in Malaysia, eventually being convicted of corruption, Jho stayed in hiding. Authorities believe he has been protected by powerful allies in China, though his exact whereabouts remain a mystery. The 1MDB scandal wasn't just about one man's greed. It revealed deep flaws in the global financial system. How could billions be moved so easily through banks without triggering alarms? How could a single sovereign wealth fund be looted for years without accountability? Goldman Sachs eventually paid nearly $3 billion in fines for its role in the scandal. Regulators around the world vowed reforms. Yet the story of Jho Low is a reminder that when money, power, and glamour intersect, oversight often disappears. For Malaysia, 1MDB was a national tragedy. Money that should have funded schools, hospitals, and infrastructure was squandered on yachts and parties. Trust in government was shattered, leading to political upheaval that changed the nation's leadership. And for the world, it stands as a cautionary tale. Never underestimate the power of illusion. Jho Low was not a billionaire, not a visionary investor. He was a con man, one who understood that in an age of celebrity culture and financial opacity, appearances can be more powerful than truth. So what if I told you that behind the champagne-soaked parties, the Hollywood red carpets, and the glittering art auctions, there was nothing but stolen money and lies? That the smiling young man at the center of it all wasn't a genius financier, but one of the greatest fraudsters in history? The 1MDB scandal was not just Malaysia's burden. It was a mirror reflecting the vulnerabilities of the entire global financial system. A story that stretched from Kuala Lumpur to New York, from Abu Dhabi to Hollywood. It showed us how greed, ambition, and unchecked power can turn a nation's hopes for progress into one man's personal playground. And Jho Low? He remains a fugitive, hidden in the shadows, shielded by powerful networks, perhaps still clinging to the illusion of wealth and status. His face may no longer be splashed across magazine covers, but his story continues to haunt courtrooms, governments, and ordinary Malaysians who were robbed of a brighter future. The legacy of 1MDB is more than yachts and mansions seized, more than politicians disgraced or bankers fined. It is a lesson, a warning, that corruption on this scale does not just drain treasuries. It corrodes trust, erodes democracy, and leaves scars that last for generations. Because in the end, the most dangerous con is not the theft itself, but the illusion, the carefully crafted lie that convinces the world you deserved every dollar, every painting, every party. If you found this story eye-opening, don't forget to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the hidden scandals, mysteries, and stories that shaped our world.